The Netherlands. Known today for its beautiful canals, windmills, and tulips. But what if I told you this peaceful land has a history filled with Viking raids, rebellions against powerful empires, and a golden age that shaped the modern world? What lies beneath the cobbled streets of Amsterdam or the quiet dunes of the North Sea is a history spanning thousands of years, an evolution from ancient tribes to one of Europe's most influential nations. How did a small country, often fighting against the sea itself, become a global superpower? The answers are as mysterious as the legends that shaped this land. Welcome to the untold history of the Netherlands. Chapter 1. Prehistoric Origins. Our journey begins long before the rise of any Dutch kingdom, over 13,000 years ago, when the Netherlands was little more than a frozen tundra. As the last ice age ended, the landscape began to transform. Vast glaciers retreated, leaving behind a land rich with rivers and lakes but also prone to devastating floods. The earliest people who settled in this challenging environment were hunter-gatherers. Archaeological discoveries show that around 5600 BC, the Swifterbent culture emerged, living along rivers and lakes. These early inhabitants relied heavily on fishing, hunting, and foraging to survive. By 5000 BC, a major shift occurred. Agriculture arrived, brought by the linear pottery culture, who introduced farming techniques from Central Europe. Southern Limburg, one of the most fertile regions, saw the first signs of permanent settlements. Over the next centuries, different waves of settlers brought new advancements in farming, pottery, and animal husbandry. The funnel beaker culture took root around 4000 BC, spreading farming across much of the north. But even as they established farms, the people of the Netherlands were always in a delicate dance with the elements. The rivers that nourished their crops also threatened their homes with floods. It became clear from the earliest times, the inhabitants of the Netherlands needed to not just adapt to nature but master it. Chapter 2. The Roman Invasion. By the time the Romans arrived in the Netherlands in 57 BC, they encountered a region filled with different tribes, from the Frisians in the north to the Batavians in the central river delta. Julius Caesar's conquests brought the southern part of the Netherlands under Roman control, and for the next 4 centuries, the region was a militarized frontier of the Roman Empire. The Batavians, a Germanic tribe, became one of the most important allies of the Roman Empire. They were renowned for their military prowess, particularly in cavalry, and were often recruited into the Roman army. But the relationship between the Batavians and the Romans was far from peaceful. While the Batavians enjoyed a degree of autonomy, they grew increasingly resentful of the heavy taxes and the recruitment of their youth into the Roman military. In 69 AD, the tension reached its breaking point. Under the leadership of Gaius Julius Civilis, the Batavians launched a fierce rebellion against Roman rule, which would come to be known as the Batavian Revolt. They burned Roman forts, ambushed legions, and for a brief moment, it seemed like they might succeed in driving the Romans out entirely. The revolt became a defining moment in Dutch history, a symbol of resistance against foreign rule. Although the Romans eventually crushed the rebellion, the legacy of the Batavians as fierce warriors who fought for their freedom left a lasting mark on Dutch identity. Chapter 3. The Middle Ages. After the collapse of the Roman Empire, the Netherlands entered a period of fragmentation and turmoil. The land was divided among powerful Germanic tribes, most notably the Frisians in the north and the Franks in the south. The Frisian kingdom, at its peak in the 7th century, controlled much of the coastal region and was a dominant force in trade across the North Sea. However, this period was also marked by the constant threat of invasion, from other tribes and, most notably, from the Vikings. In the 9th and 10th centuries, Viking raiders from Scandinavia terrorized the Dutch coasts and river towns, plundering villages and establishing temporary bases. Cities like Dorstad, one of the largest trading centers in Europe at the time, were repeatedly sacked by Viking forces. The Viking raids were devastating, but they also pushed the fragmented Dutch territories to unite and defend themselves. Despite the violence, trade continued to flourish, and by the 11th century, the Dutch coastal regions had rebuilt, this time with stronger defenses against future invaders. Meanwhile, in the south, the Franks were growing in power under the Carolingian Empire, which brought much of the Netherlands under their control. The famous Emperor Charlemagne made repeated attempts to subdue the northern Frisians, eventually incorporating them into his empire in the late 8th century. Chapter 4. The Rise of the Dutch Provinces. In the late Middle Ages, the Netherlands was a fractured land of feudal lords, knights, and independent cities. The major provinces, such as Holland, Zeeland, Brabant, and Friesland, operated independently, each ruled by powerful local nobles. During this period, a power struggle developed between the emerging Dutch cities and their feudal overlords. As the cities grew wealthier through trade, their citizens sought more independence, leading to constant conflicts with the nobility. But the real turning point came in 1433, when the Duchy of Burgundy, under the leadership of Philip the Good, united most of the Low Countries under its control. Under Burgundy, the Netherlands became one of Europe's most prosperous regions. Trade boomed, and the great Dutch cities of Bruges, Antwerp, and Amsterdam became centers of commerce and culture. The Burgundian period was also a time of great artistic and cultural growth, with the Dutch benefiting from the patronage of Burgundian nobles. But this newfound unity and prosperity were fragile. As the 16th century dawned, tensions began to rise, particularly over religion. The Protestant Reformation was sweeping across Europe, and the Dutch were about to find themselves at the heart of a great religious and political conflict. Chapter 5. The Dutch Revolt. The 16th century saw the Netherlands under the control of the powerful Habsburg monarchy, ruled by King Philip II of Spain. While the Habsburgs had initially allowed the Dutch provinces a degree of autonomy, Philip II sought to centralize control and, more importantly, stamp out the growing Protestant movement. The Dutch, who had embraced Calvinism, saw this as a direct attack on their religious freedom and their local governance. Tensions escalated into open conflict in 1568, marking the beginning of the 80 Years' War, a bloody struggle for independence from Spain. Leading the rebellion was William of Orange, a nobleman who became the face of Dutch resistance. The conflict was brutal, with the Spanish employing scorched-earth tactics, massacring entire cities such as Zutphen and Haarlem in their attempts to crush the rebellion. Yet, the Dutch fought on, using guerrilla tactics, fortified cities, and their deep knowledge of their watery landscape to outlast the might of the Spanish Empire. In 1581, the Dutch formally declared their independence from Spain with the Act of Abjuration, though the war would continue for decades. Finally, in 1648, the Peace of Westphalia officially recognized the independence of the Dutch Republic. A small nation had managed to defy one of the most powerful empires in the world, and a new era was about to begin. Chapter 6. The Dutch Golden Age. The 17th century marked the dawn of the Dutch Golden Age, a time when the Dutch Republic emerged as one of the wealthiest and most powerful nations in the world. The secret to their success: trade. With the founding of the Dutch East India Company, VOC, in 1602, the Dutch became masters of the seas, establishing a vast trading empire that spanned from the Americas to Asia. The VOC was the world's first multinational corporation, with its own private armies, fleets of ships, and control over entire colonies. Dutch merchants became some of the wealthiest people in Europe, and Amsterdam grew into the continent's financial hub. But the Dutch Golden Age wasn't just about wealth. It was a time of cultural and intellectual flourishing. Painters like Rembrandt, Vermeer, and Frans Hals created timeless works of art that captured the everyday life of the Dutch, from bustling markets to intimate family portraits. The Dutch also made groundbreaking contributions to science, with figures like Christiaan Huygens, who discovered the rings of Saturn, and Antony van Leeuwenhoek, the father of microbiology. It was a period of incredible innovation, creativity, and ambition. However, the Golden Age had its darker side. The Dutch were deeply involved in the Atlantic slave trade, with the Dutch West India Company playing a major role in transporting enslaved Africans to the Americas. The wealth of the Dutch Empire was built, in part, on the suffering of others, a legacy that continues to be reckoned with today. Chapter 7. Decline and Revival. By the late 17th century, the Dutch Republic's Golden Age began to wane. A series of wars with Britain, including the Anglo-Dutch Wars, eroded Dutch naval power. The once mighty fleet was outmatched by Britain's growing empire, and by the 18th century, the Dutch had lost their status as Europe's dominant maritime power. Internally, the Dutch Republic was plagued by political strife. The power struggle between the Orangists, who supported the House of Orange, and the Patriots, who sought greater republicanism, led to civil unrest. The patriotentage of the 1780s saw the Patriots attempt to overthrow the Orangist regime, but their efforts were crushed by a Prussian invasion. Then came the French Revolution, which swept across Europe, including the Netherlands. In 1795, the Dutch Republic was replaced by the Batavian Republic, a French puppet state. Under Napoleon, the Netherlands became a satellite state known as the Kingdom of Holland, ruled by Napoleon's brother, Louis Bonaparte. However, after Napoleon's defeat in 1815, the Congress of Vienna re-established the Kingdom of the Netherlands, uniting the northern and southern provinces under King William I. But this unity was short-lived. The southern provinces, culturally and religiously distinct, broke away in 1830 to form Belgium, leaving the northern provinces as the modern Netherlands. Chapter 8. World Wars. The 20th century brought new challenges for the Netherlands. In World War I, the country managed to remain neutral, avoiding much of the devastation that befell its neighbors. But in World War II, neutrality would not save them. In 1940, Nazi Germany invaded and occupied the Netherlands. For 5 long years, the Dutch lived under brutal Nazi rule. The occupation was marked by oppression, starvation, and the horrific deportation of the country's Jewish population, including the young and Frank, whose diary would later become one of the most famous accounts of life during the Holocaust. Despite the horrors, the Dutch resistance fought bravely against the occupiers, and in 1945, the Netherlands was liberated by the Allied forces. The post-war years saw the country rapidly rebuild, thanks in part to the Marshall Plan, which provided crucial economic aid. Chapter 9. Modern Netherlands. Today, the Netherlands stands as one of the most prosperous and innovative nations in the world. Its economy is closely linked to that of Germany, and the country has become a leader in sustainable energy, technology, and international diplomacy. The Netherlands was a founding member of both NATO and the European Union, and its capital, The Hague, is home to several international courts, including the International Court of Justice. From its humble beginnings as a land of fishermen and farmers, to its golden age of empire and trade, to its modern role as a global innovator, the Netherlands continues to write its own unique history. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more fascinating tales from history. If you enjoyed this video and want to dive deeper into the fascinating history of Netherlands, grab a copy of our detailed book version, link in the description. Packed with rich insights and captivating stories, it's a must-read for history enthusiasts.